Hi there, welcome to Tuesday's Indycar on the 16th of October. I'm Gordon Ross, and in today's show I'm looking at the work of blogger Roddy McLeod today, whose article as Barrhead Boy today really sums up the entire situation that the British state finds itself in this week. As we all know, we've been watching this slow motion catastrophe as it occurs before our eyes, and when you stop cringing and look at it for a while, you begin to see how the outcome is going to play out, what it's going to end up with at the end of this process. And Roddy came out with a few very interesting observations which I think are worth mentioning on the show today. As he listed the things that are happening at the moment, he mentioned the fact that the original Chequers plan, which Mrs May is still talking about, despite the fact that nobody else accepts that it's actually going to go ahead. Even Barney and the 27 European countries have rejected the Chequers agreement, but Mrs May is still living in denial and talking about it as it's going to happen in the Commons. And also he pointed out that Jeremy Corbyn, the famous straw man, the man who basically just blows in the wind, it seems, cannot come up with a coherent opposition to Mrs May or her plans, or square the circle of Ireland, or any of the other problems that have been created by the British state in this ridiculous situation that it's got itself into. So Corbyn and possibly the remaining Blairites within the Labour Party might just be enough to get Mrs May's cobbled together so-called blind Brexit through the Commons, and for us to proceed out of the European Union in a slightly less disorderly way, but at the same time with no deal. And despite calling it, a blind Brexit, the truth of the matter is it's still a no-deal Brexit. And whatever happens in a no-deal Brexit is not going to be good for anybody, and least of all Scotland, which we know from a report which the British government refuses to publish, incidentally, that Scotland will be the hardest hit of the four parts of the United Kingdom because of its much larger exporting economy. Pardon me. And so Roddy has really sort of got this figured out. And in his article today, he also was pointing out that that Nicola Sturgeon, who was down giving an excellent and well-considered speech at the RSA in London, was pointing out that nothing, and she never evaded a question. She answered every single question directly and honestly without waffle, a very, very unusual thing in British politics. If you compare Nicola's performance to Mrs May evades and waffles and obfuscates and basically just temporises and stalls for time. She never actually says anything. Contrasted with that was Nicola Sturgeon's direct answers to questions from... Hi, welcome back. I'm sorry about the break in transmission there. I was talking about Nicola Sturgeon and the contrast between the way she answered questions and the way Mrs May answered hers. But at the end of at the end of Nicola Sturgeon's speech, she was asked what her red lines were, what the Scottish red lines were with Brexit, and she was very clear about it. She said, the red lines for Scotland are, we must be in the customs union and still within the European market. Nothing else will be good enough. Anything else, Scotland will reject it. So I think she couldn't make it any plainer than that. If the Brexit agreement that Mrs May tries to push through the Commons does not contain those two things, then Scotland will not support it. In other words, they don't have our consent to do it at all. Now this is an excellent point for Miss Sturgeon to make, because the one thing that we've lacked up until now from the Scottish viewpoint is clarity. What is our position? Our position in Brexit at the moment, officially now, is nothing but remaining in the customs union and remaining in the single market will do. Anything else less than that is unacceptable. These are our bare minimum standards. So we now know what ours are. We know what the Brexiters' red lines are. Their red lines are they want to stay out of those two things. The Labour Party doesn't know what it wants, and it's probably going to help Mrs May struggle through with this insipid, watered down blind Brexit where we limp out of the EU having paid all our bills with nothing to look forward to. And that's probably exactly what's going to happen. And this is what Roddy reckons as well. This was his analysis, that we're going to end up with this insipid, useless Brexit where we have no deal at the end of it. Now, if that happens, then he reckons, and I believe he's right, that Mrs May's government will not last beyond Christmas, because this is going to cause a civil war within the Tory party. It will cause uproar amongst Brexit voters, and it just isn't acceptable. I think the Tories will struggle to do anything at all, to function even up until Christmas. And Roddy's estimation is that by Christmas, Mrs May will be gone, and the Tories will call a general election in the early part of the new year. So we're talking about, the end of December, beginning of January, fighting a general election. Now, if that's the case, then that general election then becomes de facto an independence referendum for us, because the only way we can stop what the British government is doing is to leave the UK completely and pursue our own deal with Europe as a separate country, because that's the way it's going. And one of the things that, having read Roddy's article right through several times today, that it shows everybody, is the fact that it's not the SNP which is forcing the UK to fall apart. It's Brexit. It's the English government. It's the English Tory government that's forcing the UK apart. It's actually prizing the bits apart. It's trying to trash Northern Ireland. I mean, they got to the point where if they force this weak deal through against the DUP will then stop supporting the Tory party. That's what will cause the general election to happen. And the DUP will then probably start raising their levies in Northern Ireland. Trouble will start in Northern Ireland. And do the Tory Brexiters care about that? Well, of course not. They don't give a toss about Northern Ireland. They never did. They were quite happy for that to be the cost of their leaving the EU. We now know from polling results that over 75% of Brexit voters, of Leave voters, are happy for Scotland to leave the United Kingdom and for Northern Ireland to basically reunify with Ireland if that is the cost of their Brexit. They are the ones who are happy with it. So you're talking about 12 million English voters who are now quite happy for the for Scotland to leave the UK and for Northern Ireland to be dumped into chaos with the hope that it will eventually reunify. And that's an interesting one, because it's not the Scottish people who are forcing Britain apart. This is Brexit voters who are destroying the Union. Now, Mrs May claims to be, she calls it the dear Union, our precious Union, but she's struggling. And I don't think she will make it to Christmas either. I think that the forces of Brexit are too powerful. It's driving a wedge right through the heart of the UK and just forcing the nations apart. Now, you'll know that I've been involved with Dr. McLeod on promoting the new constitution for Scotland, and this is not something that came from the Scottish Independence Convention. It didn't come from Commonweal. It's come directly from one academic who specialises in constitutional law and teaching it at university, and he is probably one of the best and most knowledgeable people on constitutions generally that I've ever met. And Mark has spent 5 years creating a super constitution, one which is the most refined version of a constitution I've ever seen, which guarantees the rights and responsibilities of every individual, every group, every company, every government department, everything written down in a constitution, which guarantees that every person in Scotland will be able to access every part of Scottish law on their phone virtually. He's talking about the most modern democracy on the face of the planet, and he's created a constitution which will start it. Something which people have argued about this, whether we should have the constitution before independence or not. The point is, if we've got a constitution before we're independent, it's much easier to argue that things are going to be better, because you can say, there's the constitution, that will be the first thing that's written into legislation in the new country, and this is what it guarantees for you. Even you, the no voter, even you, the Brexit voter, even you, the Conservative or Labour voter, these are your guarantees in this new country. So no matter which way you voted in the independence referendum, we're guaranteeing your freedoms, we're guaranteeing your human rights, we're guaranteeing your union representation. All of these things are going to be written into law. It's a much easier proposition to sell to somebody when they know what they're going to get. You know you're going to get a currency, you know you're going to have your pension paid, you know your pension is going to be raised to a common level across Europe. You're not going to be the poor pensioner of the world anymore. So, as Roddy pointed out at the end of his article today, we live in interesting times, and we're rather privileged to actually be sitting at a point in history where we can observe an entire empire coming apart at the end of its life. Like a supernova, it's about to explode just under the sheer pressure from within. And we get to sit and watch this happen and create our own new Scotland out of the ashes of this sort of phoenix out of the ashes of this. So we're privileged. There's not many people lucky enough to live in times where there is about to be a big upheaval in the country, but a big upheaval where Scotland is going to come out of it better than it went in. Unlike 2014, we're not fighting alone now. We've got Brexiters fighting for us. We've got Brexiters who want us to be independent. We've got 12 million English voters who want Scotland to leave the UK, plus the 1.7 million or whatever it is now of Scottish people who now want independence. We now know we're at or just above 50% of the Scottish population according to British polls. So if you add on to that the fact that there's pressure now from England for Scotland to leave the UK, and there's pressure from Northern Ireland to reunify so that Brexit can continue, then you're looking at basically the right wing of British politics dismantling the union for us and allowing Scotland to go on its way and do what we've always wanted to do, and what we should have done in 2014 if we had had the information that we now know. If we had known then that we were going to Brexit, then it wouldn't have been a no vote in 2014. We wouldn't be sitting here having these conversations and waiting for this to happen. So I wanted to really flag this article up. Have a look at Barrhead Boy's article today and read it, and you'll see what I mean. There are many very good journalists and political commentators in the independence movement who are unpaid, unsung heroes, who write every day, who produce fantastic bodies of work every single day, never get any recognition at all. And I thought, reading Roddy's piece this morning, it was about time he got some airtime on Indycar as well, and maybe get him in the car. I'd like to interview Roddy at some point. I've spoken to Paul Kavanagh many times when we've been on panels. That's the guy who writes under the name of Wee Ginger Doug. And Paul is a wonderful writer and a very funny man, a great humorist. But Roddy, by comparison, although he's funny, is far more politically astute, I think, and he has really zeroed in on what's about to happen. I think he's got this right. I think the pressure from the DUP are going to be cast aside because the Tories want Brexit to go through, and if the DUP is the only thing standing in the way, they will swat them aside and they will force this bill through, regardless of how poor it is. And the DUP will moan and complain, and there will be trouble in Northern Ireland, but the Tories won't care. They won't care that Scotland leaves the UK either, as long as they get out of the European Union, because that has always been the strategy here. It feels, and it's beginning to look as if there was never any doubt that it was always planned this way, that we were going to go out of the EU, or crashing out of the EU without any deal at all. And the future which has been set out by the right wing of the Tory party for the whole of the UK was always going to be a massive tax island where the dark money, the ill-gotten gains of the criminals from all over the globe would be invested in a low-tax banking system in the UK. And while they were doing that and making billions of pounds from laundering all this illicit money from crime and human trafficking and drugs dealing and arms dealing, while they're doing that, we would become the 51st state of the USA. And the United States would force us to lower all our standards to allow as much cheap rubbish from the USA into the British economy as possible. And also they'd want in to pick clean the NHS contracts with their healthcare companies, with their health insurance companies from America. The privatisation of the NHS has been on the cards now, I think, for about the last 10 years for the Tories. They've been gradually starving the NHS to death, to the point where they say, oh, it can't continue anymore, we can't support it anymore, it needs to be privatised. That's the only way we can improve services. That's how it's going to go. That's what the English government wants the future to be. And I emphasise the word English government because this is not happening in Scotland, nor is it happening in Northern Ireland. It's the English government which has decided to do this. The Tory government, right-wing government's decided this is your future for you. So anyway, to conclude today, read Roddy's article. It's excellent. It really, I think, nails the situation we're in at the moment. By Christmas, we think that Theresa May will be gone. There will be a general election, and we'll be fighting that general election on a single issue mandate. That if we get more than 51% of the Scottish seats in a general election of MPs, then we walk. That's it. We say that's it. We've had enough. We're out of fear, and we're going to be independent. We've got that mandate now, and that's it. We're going to legislate to put our constitution in place and declare a new nation. And then that's it. Brexit and England, they go their own way, do their own thing, and we escape that fate. And we can do whatever deal we like with Europe as a free country. We don't have to. We're not going to be forced into leaving anything. If we want to stay in the customs union, if we want to stay in the single market, we can decide to do that. If we want to reapply to be members of the EU, we can do that. If we want to ask them to keep us in the EU and continuance while we think about what we want to do, we can do that. All of these choices await us, but only if we do not lose, because now that the gloves are off, everything has changed now. We've now got 12 million English people fighting for Scottish independence as well. It's a very, very strange situation we're in. So I think we really owe a big thank you and a round of applause to the Brexit voters for helping Scotland in this way, because it's really, as well as us pushing to get out, we've got the Brexit campaigners pulling us out as well, trying to get us out of the UK so that they can get on with Brexit. So it's making our job easier, and I think Nicola Sturgeon said it all really, that nothing less than keeping us in the single market and keeping us in the customs union will be good enough for Scotland. Anything less than that, delivered by Theresa May, is unacceptable. And I think if that's the case, I can predict that if this bill goes through, that every SNP MP will probably be recalled back to Scotland. They will walk out in disgust, because that will be, the deal will be done. We'll be out. And the threat of Brexit having been carried out is all the mandate we need actually for independence. We said that we would have another referendum if we were taken out of the EU against our will. And if that bill is passed, then that guarantees we're out of the EU without any deals at all. So after that, there has to be either a general election or a referendum, and it has to happen straight away, because we know that the British government is preparing a set of emergency measures for the early part of next year. They've anticipated this. Nothing that's happening at the moment is happening by accident. All of this will have been planned over the past 2 years. It's being stage managed and rolled out and unveiled to us in a particular sequence, so that these events are under the control of the British state. And all we can do is watch as they unfold this great big phony circus show that they're putting on for the benefit of television viewers, to make it seem as though the European Union is what's doing the damage. When in reality, the right wing of the Tory party is gradually tearing the UK apart a bit at a time. And I think by February next year, we'll be having a vote on independence. It'll either be a very quick snap referendum, or it will be a general election. But by March next year, we'll be out of the UK, and the UK will be out of Europe. Anyway, that's the end of the broadcast today. Have a read of Roddy's article. Look for Barrhead Boy this morning. Have a read. I'll see you all later. Bye for now.